All right, so I'm here today with Gary Bobroff, my longtime friend and founder of Jungian Online. We're here to talk about some of the books that he's written and his Jungian journey and some recommendations he might have for you guys. First off, his latest release is Carl Jung, Knowledge in a Nutshell. It's the complete guide to the great psychoanalyst, including the unconscious, archetypes, and the self, and it goes through just a comprehensive chapter by chapter on all the major principles of Jung and Jungian practice. And then this book, it's called Crop Circles, Jung and the Reemergence of the Archetypal Feminine, which you wrote, when did you write this?
2014 it came out.
2014, yeah. Very interesting process in which I came to this book, very synchronistic, which we'll talk about. But first, let me introduce him officially. He is the founder of Jungian Online, which connects clients with Jungian analysts via live video since 2011. And he's the developer and facilitator of Archetypal Nature, a Jungian personality system rooted in the work of Tony Wolff, which maybe we'll talk about a little bit more. He is the author of the books I just mentioned, and he has an MA in psychology from Pacifica Graduate Institute and a BA from the University of British Columbia, Canada. I am also a Jungian psychotherapist, currently in the doctoral program at Pacifica, and seeing clients as well, and often working closely with Gary, doing improvs and other things like that, which have been a world of fun. So, how are you doing today, Gary?
I'm doing great. Thank you for being here.
Good
Thank
to
you
have
for having me. Yeah.
I'm excited to chat with you. So why don't we start by just telling the people watching what brought you to this work? Give us a little background on your association to Jung.
Yeah. So how I came to Jung was pretty young. I sort of had to think about it, writing this book and talking about the book, and it realized it's been a long journey with me and Jung. So I did the MBTI for the first time in grade 7. I went to a smart kid grade 7 and grade 8.
It's pretty early to do the MBTI.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I've had that lens going on since that age. And then I guess synchronistically, that the same teacher that I had in grade 7 who was friends with an ex-girlfriend's mom, when I was in my early 20s, was doing an archetype workshop on the Tony Wolff's material, which was handed down to them from Ted and Noreen Guzie, who did, added their parts to it. And so there's a part of like a lineage that I actually am in from Tony Wolff down to me, which feels really cool. So I had the MBTI at 13 and then this archetype workshop when I was, 23. And that just completely lit me up. So seeing Tony Wolff's archetypes in this workshop, I knew that at the end of that weekend, this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I was still pretty young, so I didn't, immediately, start training. I started at Pacifica, 5 or 6 years later. And so I did Pacifica and have all that experience and taking classes and great teachers, and had Corbett and Slattery and different, really interesting teachers and all kinds of adventures as one does at Pacifica. Only later, a decade later, I started Jungian Online, and after that, I actually started analysis. And I think there's such a huge difference. We'll talk about this more, but there's such a huge difference between reading about Jung and even studying Jung at Pacifica and being in analysis. Yeah. And I just think that their two are just night and day. And so you can read all the Jung you want, and until you start actually working with dreams and working with an analyst, hopefully who's really good. There are good ones and not great ones. That's just reality, just like with psychologists. So, with a good analyst, I think, it's super powerful. We'll talk about that more, but that's the timeline of my journey. And there were synchronicities, getting me to Pacifica a little bit and all that. But Jung's been around for a while on my radar.
I love to hear that, because I don't think we've actually ever discussed the details of your coming to this work like that. Um, I'm curious, before we kind of get into more about the importance of analysis and the difference between kind of the book journey and the analytic journey. Um, could you speak a little bit about Toni Wolff? Because I mean, that really sounds like you came to Toni Wolff rather than Jung, and I love that.
Right.
And I
Thank
love
you.
that you always push her and differentiate her from him. So tell us a little bit about
Thank
Toni.
you. Yeah. So for those people that don't know, Toni Wolff was Jung's close companion, and during his period of time when he was doing his confrontation with the unconscious and basically, you know, having his breakdown, breakthrough, whatever you want to call it, she was there as his companion, and I like to say psychic lifeguard, you know, helping him get through all this, and was really key. And much of Jungian psychology has been influenced by Toni Wolff and been influenced by women. And when I think of Jungian psychology, I don't think Carl Jung's psychology. I think Carl Jung did a heck of a lot and was great, amazing, you know, but there were also many, many women and a few men around who really, you know, fleshed it out. And that first generation of analysts, so many of them were women. And Toni, you know, was also the president of the Zurich Psychological Club for a long time. She lectured on her archetypal model in 1934 for the first time. And, you know, maybe we'll get into that a little bit, but it's been really interesting to me because there's a parallel between what Toni was talking about and how she divided up different kinds of personalities in 1934, and how Rinpoche, Chogyam Trungpa, his 5 Buddha families, parallels that. And I had heard about that for a long time, and when I finally really looked, I was just blown away because there's such similarities, but we'll talk about that more. So Toni was a really deep person, and if people look at a picture, there's a great portrait of Toni Wolff, and you can just see the depth of her eyes. And in the Zurich Psychological Club, there were 3 portraits that hung, at least this is the story as I understand it. There was Toni Wolff, Carl Jung, and Emma Jung. So that's, you know, that's pretty straight up. And so Toni, you know, from people that I've talked to from like sort of the, you know, the underground of the Jungian scuttlebutt, you know, the reason that we have the intuitive type in the MBTI is, or in psychological types, is because of Toni. That's my understanding.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So do you recommend her book, Toni? It's somebody else's book, but it's Toni Wolff's 4 Archetypes. What do you think about that book?
I'm not sure which one you're referring to.
There's one on Toni Wolff's 4 Archetypes, and sometimes
you mean the four Eternal Women one, or?
Maybe that's it, yeah.
Well, I mean, there's different. I mean, people can go online and they can read Toni Wolff's 1934 lecture where she describes, you know, it's her paper that she presented in 1934, and that's one thing, but it's coming from a different era, so I think sometimes that's a bit hard for people. The book that was the most influential to me was About Men and Women by Tad and Noreen Guzie, who took Toni's system and they fleshed it out for men and women, and they adjusted it slightly. And you know, the next book that I'm going to write will be an intro to that material. So I don't know that there's a perfect introduction to it now, and I honestly don't have a book I would recommend on it. I mean, About Men and Women is a decent place to start, but even it is a bit dated. Came out in the 90s, really written from a sort of an 80s point of view. It's okay, it's good, and it was one of my foundational texts, but
I think so many foundational texts, but we always have to be critical nowadays, and Jung would be critical too.
Sure.
So holding that, I'll put some of these books that we talk about down in the information for this interview so people can access that, and we'll probably be talking about a handful more. What do you think about Toni Wolff versus, what's his name?
Robert L. Moore. Okay, we're going to get right into it. So, so I'm going to actually probably do a paper and a video lecture on this soon. But Robert L. Moore is the author of King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, and I'm a student of Robert L. Moore. I've read those books. I've listened to hundreds of hours of Robert L. Moore talking. He's a super interesting lecturer and a very gifted person in lots of intellectual ways. And and his King, Warrior, Magician, Lover has had a huge influence on the men's movement and the Mankind Project in particular. And it is kind of sort of based on it. I think of it as like a cousin, but I think there's huge problems with King, Warrior, Magician, Lover and Robert Elmore's work. I think he makes the mistake of, basically he equates the king archetype with the self. And so he'll say, if you've got the king archetype, you've got the lover and you've got the warrior, you've got the other, which is total nonsense. It's nonsense. And and there's also a problem that he tries to say he's not doing it, but he does it, where he basically has taken the feminine out of the journey to the self. And I think that's a huge problem. I think it's having huge effects on the men that do that work. I think they're missing stuff that they don't get. And he also is critical of Tony in places in the book. And I think, he says that a ridiculous statement in one of his books is, he says that the queen archetype is bigger than the mother archetype. And I'm like, what? Says who? I don't know if any Jungian agree with that. And by the way, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover is not taught, as far as I know, anywhere in any Jung institute or in any Jungian school, as far as I know. And for me, there's Robert is writing, from my point of view, from the place of the archetypal father, which is, we could talk about somebody else that's also writing from the place of the archetypal father, and they don't know it. They don't know what that means. And to me, you're writing from the place of the patriarch. You're writing from the place of the daddy. And that's, has some good things and some bad things. And but I think that he misses so much, and especially the idea that if you've got the king, you've got these other archetypes, which is absolutely not true. A lot of men that are coming from the place of the father really have to work hard to get in touch with the lover and the feminine. And to tell them, oh, you've already got it, that's the out they want to hear. It's very problematic stuff. And I come from a place of really knowing, reading, understanding, studying that stuff, and having a lot of time with it. I've been looking at that material for, 20 years at least at this point, 25 years. I understand the good things that he's doing there. And I think that there is a way that framework has some truth, but the idea that the king contains these other ones, no.
It's really fascinating to think about, and when we go on Wikipedia and we look up the history of the men's movement and how there's so much muddle now with the men's rights movement, which is a completely different movement. It's very interesting to hear you say, like, sometimes they'll feel like they've already got it when it comes to the lover, or comes to the yin aspect of the work. I was just reading something by Edinger the other night, who is also often used or misused, we could say, by some of these other kind of shadow figures that try to teach from the patriarchy. But I read directly from Edinger that if the anima or the yin is used for self-mastery or used for self-gain, she'll get very angry. There's a big difference between receiving her and, meeting with her and allowing her to guide you than kind of objectifying the anima and using her for self-mastery. And I think that's something very curious that gets lost in the muddle that we've been experiencing lately.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of the men that are doing that work are not connected to the anima, not connected to feeling, not connected to vulnerability and emotion. And, I hope I'm wrong, but I've heard so many stories. I know it's true. And, and I think the difference, this is one of the key things, and I think it's really hard for men that are coming from the place of the father to get this, because the father has, sort of been kicked down some notches in the last couple of decades, right? So he's kind of struggling. Where am I? Well, I'm not the king of the castle anymore. Who am I? Oh, I can have some empathy and sympathy for that. But these sort of systems that kind of want to rebuild this whole men's movement thing, they really identify, with the ego and with the conscious self, and they really miss so many of these things. And the difference is, like, you know, Jung was basically like a Taoist. You know, he was wanted to flow with what nature was intending, not impose his will.
Mhm.
And so much of the masculine is coming from this place of imposing your will, control, I conquer, I master, da, 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 all this. And that is the opposite of what Jung is talking about. Jung is talking about, you know, living in a place of authenticity, humility, vulnerability, genuine, connecting to your genuine feeling, not trying to be the conqueror, not trying to go out there and, you know, be better than everybody else, but a very Taoist approach. And that is in conflict with the masculine principle in general, that is, you know, our aggression and all that. And we have to be connected to that, you know, and we have to have some relation to that to be healthy. We need some healthy aggression, of course. But, you know, that principle is dominant in our world and certainly dominant in America. And I think you can understand our whole cultural moment and zeitgeist as the conflict between, I would say, frankly, the abusive father being called out by the elder daughter or by the daughter. And so you have, you know, Greta and AOC and et cetera, and then a bunch of regressive men saying, oh, what is she doing? And you know, and the earth is sitting there going, please help me, stop destroying me. Like, you know, that is the conflict of our age. So we cannot coddle these folks, you know, and there's the biggest taboo in American culture is, you know, calling out daddy's shadow.
It is a big taboo. I think it's getting louder with what we're seeing and having to experience now, especially here in the States, with our, you know, current president, and kind of looking at this archetypal manifestation as within, so without. Very curious to call that ego into question and decentralize that figure. It's very interesting when we get into these more narrow spaces, like within our discipline and our work, where people really identify with one archetype, or they take these archetypes very literally, whether you're the goddess or you're, you know, you're the king, warrior, lover, magician, whatever. It's very, very literal, and over identifying with the yin or the yang when we are working with both internally. That the self figure is a unification of both of them, and not one of them more dominant than the other. So I find it all very curious, but let's go back. I'm interested in, because you're speaking about this now from a collective level, this reemergence of the archetypal feminine. I think this is a huge question. People who do the work really feel into this. We love to see it happening out in the world. So tell me about this book in reference to that and what you're seeing now after you've written it.
Sure. I mean, I couldn't, you know, I couldn't be more in agreement with what I wrote in that book. It's just, you know, more and more of the same. So, you know, I believe that we are, as I said, we're in this moment of the masculine principle dying off and the feminine principle, you know, struggling against it. And, you know, we have to have the feminine win or it's game over. You know, the planet will not survive. Like in Jungian psychology, feminine and masculine. Feminine does not, for the 1,000th time, you know, for people that don't know, I know we know. For listeners that don't know, feminine does not equal female and women. That is not what we're talking about. Of course, it includes women, obviously. And masculine does not mean men. These are principles that both of us, I mean, Jungians were the original androgyny, you know, pro-androgyny or pro-bisexuality folks, or whatever you want to say. I mean, Jung was acknowledging that there's feminine in the most masculine men like 100 years ago. So,
and we have a lot of masculine women, especially the Karens out there right now.
I'll let you handle that. So, but I think, you know, what that book that came out in 2014 is about the feminine. It really is. It's not, you know, it's about crop circle mystery, and there's beautiful ways that actually Tony Wolff comes into it again, and the final chapter is so much a mystery connected to Tony Wolff, and I won't ruin it for people that haven't got there yet, but like Tony came into that so strongly, and then she was behind my archetype work, so there is some weird way that I ended up. And I found, the reason that book got written, I wrote an MA on the topic with Lionel Corbett magically as my MA advisor. And then I found, after I did that, I found this pamphlet in the Pacifica Library randomly. And it just absolutely connects visually all these things. There was a art therapist from England who was Toni Wolff's analysand, and she had this vision of, you know, the spinning thing coming down to the earth and then turning into a woman. And she painted all these images and took them to Zurich. And in 1953, when Toni died, she looked at these images with Jung. And Jung chose one of them for the cover of his original cover of his book on UFOs. And so there was this, we had all the pieces, all the threads that I had written about in the thesis. Here they were, living color. Toni had already been talking about this, you know, indirectly before crop circles became popular in early 1950s. So anyway, so that was the backstory there, but all this stuff was really tied together. So the book is about the feminine. And so, you know, there's a huge group of thinkers and Jungians and other people that look at the last 2,000 plus years as a masculine journey. So more ego, more strength, more scientific mind, the differentiation. You know, you separate from the object, that masculine move, differentiation, and then you understand the truth of it better. A necessary journey, but that phase of our evolution is coming to an end, and another impetus is arising, and we need to join. It's like David Attenborough saying, and 100 other people right now saying, we have to stop worrying about acting on and over nature and start acting with. And it's exactly the same with the soul and the feminine and the unconscious, and that's the journey. And so in the book, I just look at all the ways that we think about that in the Jungian world, that, you know, there was this journey that we've gone on, and I described the journey and all the ways that the feminine in the Jungian world is associated with the beginnings of birth and matter and the dark, fecund matter. And of course, how are crop circles and the feminine connected in the most basic way? Well, they're in grain. They're in living grain, the seed that goes in the dark earth and miraculously comes back to life, that miracle of life that we've forgotten. And so, you know, crop circles are formed. The plants aren't dead in a real crop circle, but we don't have to get too much into the science there.
Love that. I love that part of the book, you know, talking about really what is happening to the land and the plant here. Really looking from the ground up, just like we do in therapy, you know, from the bottom up, rather than speculating from what's happening above. Yeah.
Yeah, and so then it goes into, you know, from the origin point of the feminine as the beginning into this masculine journey, and then our time as returning to it. So, I mean, I see the feminine in so many different things. In the quantum physics realization that the observer affects the experiment. The world is quantumly entangled with not only our person, but our heart, and we'll talk about that more. You know, the way that synchronicities happen. And there is, to me, there's no such thing as a synchronicity that's not connected to emotion. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a way that, you know, Jung said, feeling is psychic mass. So you want to talk about psyche transcends time and space, which it does, and that's what the Jungians believe. Well, let's put an equation in there, and the equation that has to be included is the heart. You know, how does a mother know when the child is in danger on the other side of the world? How does a sister, you know, have a vision of a brother who died in Vietnam? You know, there's thousands of, you know, the historic records are endless of this stuff. And consciousness is not in the brain. It's not even the body. It extends. It's a mystery. We don't know what it is. Readers can read Rupert Sheldrake's Sense of Being Stared At if they want to get an education and realize this is not where your consciousness is.
Well, and I'm just writing down here so we remember to put these books down in the comments area. But I'm fascinated about that Toni Wolff image that you were talking about.
Yeah.
And I have this similar image come up for my clients, and you know, my dissertation work is about repressed images of the soul and how she manifests. And that there's this common image of like spiraling down, the feminine coming down and what that feels like for women, but what it also feels like for men, and feels like just to meet the feminine, but also very much mirroring the subtle body when you talk about, you know, these things coming from the heart, synchronicity and connection to this coming from the heart. It's very interesting to consider.
Yeah, and I think all of these things are, you know, every time that we become aware of a synchronicity, every time that we understand, you know, this mystery that's connected to feminine, I think our time is about, you know, we can come to meet the feminine through these beautiful mysteries, crop circles, synchronicities, extension of mind, all these things that are beautiful and positive. Or we can be dragged there by global crisis, earth crisis. What is all these things, all of these climate change changes, what do? They bring us closer to nature, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, that's what Woodman always said. You know, we either make the archetype conscious or we get dragged like a pig to slaughter.
Yeah.
And she was always big on those intense statements, which I love her for. And it's true. It's, whether it's romantically or it's on a collective level, I think it's very much the same thing.
Yeah, and I think all of the insistence of the masculine principle that, oh, we're keeping it our way. We're not giving up our power. We're going to keep on destroying the earth. We're keeping our money. All of that masculine rigidity is going to get smashed. I mean, our era is the era of the fall of the masculine idols. You know, think of all the sports figures, like there were like a couple decades where it was like every week a new sports idol was smashed. You know, OJ, the cyclist, Lance Armstrong, all the sexual abuse scandals at colleges, and you know, we had a long period where it was like just smash masculine idols one after the other. And you know, if you said to someone 50 years ago, oh, look at the dark side of the Vatican and the White House and Wall Street, they would have been like, what are you talking about? Not anymore.
Well, now definitely, you know, 2020, we're seeing everything kind of sped up and really feeling that.
But there was a long journey to it before then that the masculine has been getting. We're seeing more and more and more darkness of the masculine and more light in the feminine. And we're having more, you know, feminine and female figures coming forth full of light and truth and saying, look at this, look at what you've done, right?
I think it's important to consider, you know, sometimes people, when they're new to the work, they're reading and they're like, oh, the feminine is unconscious. The feminine is the, you know, undifferentiated. It's the nothingness. But when we talk about redeeming the feminine, it's like holding these principles as sacred, that we need that in balance with the consciousness or the narrowness of the masculine. And what we see kind of, I think, when you're talking about this masculine journey that we went through, we could even talk about Western esotericism and like how it got very, very solar dominated, very much about the masculine hermetic journey, and the feminine is in there, but it's very objectified. But now we're moving more towards a left-hand path where we can find this balance that darkness is divine, chaos is divine, and we need
her. I think of it as, you know, there's the unconscious unity of mother and child, the differentiating journey of the masculine, and then the reunion at the end, which you can think about as the union of masculine and feminine, or as wisdom, Sophia, insight with heart, not just brain, wisdom, which includes the heart, not just smartness, but something in the feeling zone. So to me, that's like the top. You know, it's not like the feminine is just the unconscious. You know, it's got this top stuff and a bottom.
Sure, that dark light in the unconscious, and having them meet together. So let's kind of move now a little bit to your analytic journey and talk about, you can share some things about what it feels like to be an analysans.
Sure. Well, I do my analysis online, which, you know, I run Jungian online, so I'm happy to help folks with that. And I kind of act as a matchmaker, trying to find the right fit amongst my team for folks that want to come in. So that's a, you know, good little free service. It doesn't cost them anything. So it's huge. And like I said, you know, reading Jung, and even, you know, all the things that we do at a young age, like, you know, writing papers and all that. I mean, that's all great. But I think it's just night and day actually doing the work. And I mean, I feel, and I think a lot of people would say that it feels life-saving. It's just so empowering. You just feel like you're getting your energy back, your life back. You're healing these splits inside you. You're being witnessed. It's so powerful to have that kind of partner. And, you know, some of the things that you and I have talked about that I really appreciate about it is it's a closeness. It's really a relationship. You know, I have someone that I match made through Jungian Online, described his relationship with his analyst as the best relationship he's ever had.
I love that.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, it's about a relationship with another person and not, okay, this person's up there and down here. I mean, I think there's a little bit in there that they're the authority and they know, and me as a, you know, as a Jungian scholar and bit of a clinician, I don't do too much therapy work, but, you know, a little bit. And I more do teaching and writing and this stuff and entrepreneurial stuff, which I love. But, you know, in that way, they're an authority. But I love the equality that this is two people on a journey together, and it's not, okay, they're up there and we're down here, and, you know, all that kind of nonsense as far as I'm concerned. So, yeah, it's such a powerful thing, and there is just a world of difference from reading Jung and doing the work. And I think when you do the work, you're getting put back together. You're healing these splits inside of you. You're getting your energy back. You're getting more focus on what it is you're here to do, and having the energy to do it.
I think it's always interesting to meet other people who have been in analysis, who also are studying on a particular level. There's just, there's a difference in understanding. It comes out different than it is in the books. And as obviously I champion reading, you know, a lot of these texts because I'm just, you know, I am a fanatic, but I love it's following my own synchronicity, my own thread through these books. But there's nothing that can, you know, being in analysis for a long term. I'm still in it, you know, I've been doing it for years, and the alchemy that comes through, the images that come through in the dreams, like that, there's no way to put it into words, that type of experience that you start to have. And you can read about it all day, but until you experience it, that, you know, you have to follow your own images. You can't follow a cookbook. You can't follow a framework. You have to follow soul. You have to let her lead you. And that's when it all starts to happen. And some of these things are going to sound wild until you actually do experience. That's what I get kind of weirded out sometimes, because people are talking about things and they've not been in analysis. And I'm like, if I hadn't been in analysis, I'd have thought that was crazy.
Yeah. And it's just two things based on what you just said. Like, most analysts are also still in analysis. Like you said, you're still in analysis. Yeah. Most Jungian analysts who are even 10, 20, 30 years are still working with an analyst or in supervision. They're still working on their stuff. They consider, you know, the unconscious, you know, something, an unfinished project in them. It's not like, oh, I've got it. That's not at all what we're doing. We're unfolding something that will keep unfolding until the day we drop. So I think that's a really big thing. And then, you know, the other thing is like complexes. You could talk for 1,000 years about complexes until you do some work and you realize when you're getting complexed and when you're in one. And most people don't, I mean, they hear that word and they have an idea what it means, but they don't know that they are doing it. Mm-hmm. They are caught. They're, you know, in the animus, or they're in the anima, and they're, you know, hopeless or whatever, or, you know, bitchy, or, you know, whatever the word is that we want to use it for. Sorry to use that, but, you know, but that's what's up, and that we don't understand why we're doing these things. And in fact, because they're unconscious, we almost pretend we're not doing it. Like, people don't want to see their shadow. They don't want to see the things that they're doing negatively, and they almost always very quickly start forgetting, that thing, I pushed that away. I didn't, you know. And so when you're in analysis, you not only have someone to talk to who's going to help you and get you out of the complex, you start to be able to go, oh my God, that was the complex. And you get out of it quicker, and you realize what's going on.
It's painful, but it's that's
Yes.
and when you move through it and you have that feeling of catharsis, like, oh, I can see that now. I would have never been able to see that on my own. I think Jung talks about that too,
Yeah.
the unconscious. The unconscious wants to stay unconscious. Our dreams don't always want to be remembered, but when we come into analysis, we have somebody to hold us accountable,
Yeah.
somebody to bounce things off of. And I know a
Yeah.
lot of people out there right now, like really just going on and on about shadow work and how you can do it by yourself. And that's good luck.
Yeah. No, that's the thing there's a great line from Mad Men where Don is hitting on like a 22-year-old or something. And, and, and she says to him something about, like when you go on a date and you can see what's wrong with the other person in 5 minutes and they don't see it.
Yeah.
That's the shadow.
Mm-hmm.
And so we cannot generally see our own shadow. It's that thing right behind us that we're not going to see. So you have to learn to see it, and friends can help, but an analyst, it's their job to help. And so they tend, again, knock wood, I hope you have good analyst people out there. If you have a good one, they're going to try and help you see that and help you deal with it and, package it and heal it and integrate it and give you that energy back to do the good things that you're on the planet to do. But
the gold in that.
Hmm?
And help you find the gold in that.
Yes. Oh, for sure. For sure. And sort of course correct. Like, I mean, a lot of what my analysis is just being helped to see my positive stuff too. It's like being encouraged and being like, yeah, go for that. That's great. You'll be great at that, and I think, when we're caught in a negative state or negative complex, it's just so easy to lose we lose our connection to the self. We can't find the story of our life. We can't find meaning. We can't find what we're really going through. And you learn not only from them putting you back together, but you start to be able to do that for yourself more. And move on to more complicated problems. But it is so powerful. And again, I don't think this is something that you can do on your own. And I don't think it's something that you can solve in a weekend workshop. It's
absolutely not. Well, and I had somebody once tell me, I finished my shadow work. I did that already. Which it is very funny to hear.
Yeah, I'm gonna go get my raincoat. You stay here.
So I'm curious about who your kind of most influential analysts have been, or their writings and who have inspired you.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, so I mean, I've obviously read almost, maybe not everything, but half of Woodman, so she's definitely someone I'm familiar with. I don't really put her on a pedestal. I think the only Jungian that I really put on a pedestal that's alive is Anne Ulanov, who, I just feel, when you really talk to a really great Jungian analyst, we have a few that I would say are like master level on Jungian Online. Mm-hmm. And when you talk to one of them, or when I've spoken to Anne Ulanov or seen her speak, to me, I can just feel all that work that she's done on herself, that she's done with other people. It's a palpable, thing to me. So Anne Ulanov is really up there for me.
What's your favorite
tough one. There's so many good ones. I mean, she wrote a book a long time ago called The Wisdom of the Psyche, which is a little bit Christian. I'm not Christian at all, and she includes that in some of her stuff, but she's a fully integrated Jungian. Like, you don't have to have any worries about if people are like not into the Christian thing, that we will still get tons out of her stuff. Wisdom of the Psyche is really good. The way she talks about shadow and some stuff, I found that inspiring. That's a really old book of hers. Female Ancestors of Christ is one of the ones that I referenced a bit in the Crop Circle book. Good on the feminine stuff and making you think about that in a different way. Yeah, there's so many in there. I'd have to really think about it. It's a couple more people to name. I would say Lionel Corbett, so Religious Function of the Psyche, and all of his books around that topic and title. Rick Tarnas, the historian and astrologer. really huge influence on me. I'm lucky I got to study with Corbett. I got to study with Tarnas. I got to see and speak. And I met Marion too, and I did a course with Marion. So, I mean, I think with Rick was the first time that I really understood this big archetypal journey of the feminine and the masculine was through Rick. So those are big hitters to me when I think about, you know, what's behind how I see the world and understand the time and space that we're in. It's Anne Ulanov. And Anne is great about, she'll say things like, you know, one of my favorite quotes from her is, you know, today, spirit is down into matter and into what matters, you know, into the bones. You know, it's like she's really telling us what the feminine zeitgeist in alive today is about, and it's down into matter, down into physical. She'll say like it's down into what I'm willing to do and what I'm willing not to do. You know, how can I make lifestyle changes that help my body, that make me feel better, that make me calmer, healthier? You know, those things, to me, that's the feminine. It's like, what am I willing to stop doing?
Way more immanence than, you know, that hyperfixation.
Exactly. And obviously Marion talks about that too. I think for me, you know, and Ulanov's a bit more my taste, but again, the emphasis again, just clearly describing that this is not an up trip. We're not ascending. No one's going anywhere. We're not leaving the planet. This is not an artificial simulation. All that nonsense of a male masculine up trip, that is all nutso. You know, the energy is down. We need to go down into our bodies, you know, do yoga, get healthy, take care of your body, etc., etc. Find out what you're feeling. We'll talk about feeling more, but
our sensual humanness, you know, being
yes,
getting to be a human,
yes,
having the experience. She wants you to have the experience.
Yes.
I also like Ulanov on the Psychoid. I think she talks about the Psychoid the best out of everybody in terms of archetype and the spectral archetypal aspects.
Yes. So she has so many books too. She's really prolific. So.
Yeah. So, well, thank you very much. What else did we want to talk about?
Go ahead.
Did you have a question for me?
Well, I mean, we could talk about, you know, I think we talked a bit about the sort of self-mastery and the ego earlier, so I think we've covered that. I think we talked a bit about synchronicity and feeling. I think that's somewhere that I always like to end on or speak about towards the end is just synchronicity is just such an amazing thing. And if folks don't know, I mean, Jung gave us that word. He literally coined the term. And, you know, it's a very Taoist principle. It's observing that the world and our inner state can interact and mirror each other. And, you know, one story that I give as an example is I was traveling in Canada, driving across Canada many years ago. And I, in a small town, pulled over to get gas, had to go way off the highway to get gas and then get gas coming back towards the highway. And I'm pulling up and I see this woman walking in the same direction that I'm driving. And I think, oh, that looks like my ex-girlfriend from, you know, end of high school, early college. And I get closer and it is her. And she is traveling the same place I'm traveling with her sister and brother-in-law. And so we decide to caravan and she rides with me and we're chatting. Well, in the course of our dialogue, we realized that it is 10 years to the day that we were traveling by train in the same direction, same route.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, of course they immediately kind of go on the ego thing and say, well, does this mean we are supposed to get back together and all that? But to me, you know, we have to be careful with the egoic interpretations of synchronicity. And I think a lot of what synchronicity is trying to show us is that the world is built for meaning making. Mm-hmm. That there is something going on that is bigger than our culture realizes at all. That the actions of the world can flow together in echo of feeling states. And people always miss feeling. They go on these figure it out head trips. It's like the feeling is the amazing part. And there's always, you know, and I had a very genuine love for her. And I still feel that when I see her. And so, but it wasn't about the ego trip of getting back together. It was about the universe kind of just showing that this kind of coordination is possible, and that it's not, you don't create it, you don't force it. There's some terrible, terrible sort of like how to make synchronicity work for you books that are just like the most perverse masculine nonsense that are just gross. And that's not what it's about. Like, it's a Taoist thing that it responds to our just being real and just being who we are, and sitting with our true feeling, and that there's a whole mystery going on. And it's like you break up with somebody, you run into them all over town. There's always these little nuggets of feeling that are connected to these things. And yes, we can unfold them and find meaning and do healing work from it, but it's also just connecting us to a bigger unfolding in the story. And our world is based on the opposite principle. Our world is based on power and a whole bunch of nonsense. And here's this magical quality alive in the world. And how wonderful it will be as the human race moves forward and starts to live with more appreciation and understanding and reverence and awareness of that.
What is it? Dr. Cripple says he doesn't really believe in anything anymore. The only thing he believes in is synchronicity. That there's something it's showing us. We can't really know, and that's okay. Maybe we're not supposed to. The uncertainty principle, or Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Spooky action at a distance, if you like Einstein. Something's happening. And it's leading us to remind us to look deeper, to look at the play that's happening within and without, and that there is a connection.
Yes. Yeah, and there's a way that the materialist reductionist view of the world is total nonsense. This is not, this is not a simulation. This is not, there's a physicality and a realness that is nowhere else. To me, this also connects to the sort of illusion of artificial intelligence, because our culture is so lost in a masculine psychosis. And narcissistic psychosis, that it's so lost in itself that we imagine the world to be a clockwork. Well, who makes clocks? We do. So we actually, there's a certain level which I think the human culture thinks it invented the world, and so we can't imagine anything beyond the physical. And we imagine, because we look at nature and we see a machine, and then we see ourselves in that reflection, see ourselves as a machine, and then we imagine that this, fancy jukebox computer that we're talking on right now somehow has consciousness. It does not. There's no such thing as artificial consciousness. There is not. A machine can't be really creative. It does not have feeling, obviously. And all these mysterious qualities of consciousness that the scientific world just kind of pretends aren't there. When you actually look at all those things, you realize there's this whole mystery of consciousness that is, it's the feminine half of it, the vulnerability, the magic of synchronicity, the mystery of the heart. All of these things are just waiting there for us to participate, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful,
It is beautiful. Lending itself to this theory of the machine. There's a lot of people out there talking about programming or reprogram your brain, heal yourself. Right. And, we can't heal unless Eros is present, and Eros can't be present in the machine. Yes. You have to follow that tug of the heart. So it was so great to have you come and visit me and chat about these things. Everyone watching can obviously tell that you're just a wealth of knowledge and really have a thumb on kind of these collective movements, which is always very fascinating. People should definitely check out your archetypal classes and learn more about how to see through these things, how to see archetypally. It's not one archetype. It's about seeing in the world today and being able to experience. So I'm just going to hold his books up here one more time. This one is really great. I'm currently reading it. And then if you're wanting to tap into that wealth of knowledge, we've got this kind of guidebook here, all the basic principles from a great perspective that I enjoy working with and have been working with for, I think it's over 6 years now. Is that crazy?
Yeah.
That's a long time. It went by so fast. All right. Well, thank you for being here. And
Thank you.
if anyone's interested, I'm going to put more info and more books down in the comments and some of Gary's info down there as well. So you can check out those things that he offers. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.